No question about it, there's plenty of spots you can reach and big crappie you can catch if you'll take a plunge into wade fishing. For the open-minded angler looking for a hard-to-get-to place by boat, well, this is a wade to go. It's a very productive tactic that allows you to fish for shallow water spawning crappie that rarely see a jig. Our trip today takes us to Butler Lake here in northwest Mississippi. Some of the biggest crappie I've caught anywhere come from this wide floodplain reservoir in North Mississippi. This flatland impoundment was built for flood control and fluctuates some 15 to 20 feet annually from summer to winter pool. The diversity of a flatland impoundment makes them difficult to explain, but I'll try. Normally during the winter and on into mid-spring, they remain low. But as spring rains come, these bodies of water swell to tremendous size, flooding backwater into the flat areas several miles, covering thousands of acres. The shoreline characteristics are mainly long, slow tapering banks with sparse cover on low water. However, when the water levels are extremely high, and they can be anywhere from 10, 15, 18 feet higher than they are at this present time, there's more cover than 10 men could fish in 10 years. The points are usually broad, rounded, slow tapering jobs in both the creeks and on the main lake. They normally lack timber, but some brush is usually present. The bottom content usually consists of mud, hard clay, and sand. These type lakes are laced with small cuts and coves, which are usually short and shallow, with small depressions or ditches running through many of them. Most have wide mouths and have rounded backs with isolated cover. Creek channels can also be found here. However, most are less than 20 feet wide and are basically shallow, with depths of 1 to 8 feet. And the more pronounced channels are normally found in the mid to lower section of the reservoirs. The channels on the upper reaches of the impoundment are a different story. They're considerably shallower as a result of low water. During low water periods on flood control lakes, high winds can cause creeks to silt in. And this is why a good map can really pay off. If you have a map and it shows a creek channel and you cannot locate it, check further out into deeper water. If your map is a really good one and a creek channel is shown, you can bet it was there at one time. Let's assume the lake has a high pool elevation of 270 feet and a low elevation of 250 feet. This means that the lake fluctuates approximately 20 feet, and that 20-foot interval line, as well as the channel, can be a long way out from shore on a flatland impoundment. Sure, you may see a creek or a deep ditch coming into the back end of a cove or a pocket, but it disappears as it meanders its way on out toward the main lake as a result of low water and wind action that causes siltation. But the further out you move, the more defined the creek channel should be. Now let me show you the type area we'll be wading today. We've selected an area in the upper reaches of the reservoir where the cover is much more present and dense compared to the mid and lower sections of the lake. Here the terrain is considerably flatter and much more shallower, with wide expansions of flats with a network of small ditches and depressions that meander their way all out through these shallow flats. This side view illustration will give you some insight on what the floor of the lake looks like and why it would be almost impossible to fish from a boat. These flat areas will average anywhere from 6 inches deep to 2 feet deep, dropping off from 1 foot to 4 feet deep, and it's along these shallow drops and around this type cover where we'll be fishing today. The best technique in fishing objects like this will be of a vertical nature. In cover of this type, I'm totally convinced you're going to catch bigger crappie and more crappie vertical fishing than you would by, let's say, casting ultralight tackle. Now, first of all, you can cover a wider depth range regardless if the fish are suspended or on the bottom. And secondly, you'll be able to keep your offering in one spot for a longer period of time. And this is extremely important in a muddy water environment. Third, you'll be able to control the correct presentation every time. Fourth, if they're extremely inactive and move in very tight to the submerged cover as a result of cold water or a weather change, you'll be in a much better position to tease them into hitting. And fifth, if the terrain is loaded with submerged cover, you'll spend more time tying on jigs than fishing. There we go. Look at that boil. Come out from in there. Oh, come on back here. Come on. The old pole's so long. I'll let you go back to your stump in a little bit. Let me show you the lure we'll be using today. It's a super little jig for crappie. It's a solid body jig that really stays on the hook and will last for a long time. By that I mean it's tough with plenty of tail action. It's called a Mini King and made by Strike King Lure Company. Crazy thing. Look at Mr. Crazy. There you go. Where are you going at, Buster? Come here. Got my reel in the water. Oh, it's got eggs in her. Somebody said, "Why'd you throw that fish back?" First of all, I'm lazy. I don't like to clean them. Besides, I got a lot of fish in my freezer. And those fish are full of roe and they need to spawn. I'm not hurting them, I just might hurt their pride a little bit. That's about all I'm doing. Now, let me show you something right here. Now, you see that double snag? That's always a prime spot. You can catch them off single snags, and sometimes a single snag will have 4 or 5 other snags under the water that you can't see. But when you can see one like that, that's always a good spot. They seem like they really like that. I get maybe it provides more cover to them. So you don't want to move that jig too fast because the water's muddy and they can't see it that well. You've got to give them time to pinpoint it. They can hear that movement, although there's no vibration there, but any movement in the water creates displacement of water molecules, and it's within that displacement that they can hear that, detect that sound. But I've got that rod just barely jigging it, trying to hold it in one spot. There he is. Come on. Get out in here. Come here. That old pole's so long I got to let out line when I hang one. But the advantage, come here. The advantage to that, well, you little rascal. Old black crappie. The advantage to that long pole is, let you go. You can really reach out. This one's about 12 feet long, and it's a telescopic pole. I can bring it down just by bringing it on in. I can shallow it up to 3 feet. And it's excellent to, you know, keep in your storage box. When you extend it all the way in, it's really not but about that long. It works real good, but you can really reach out there and touch someone with it. So you gotta first fix your guides. It's not uncommon to catch several off of one snag. I've caught as high, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but I fished a snag like that in shallow water and catch as many as 7 or 8 off one little old snag like that. And out in about waist deep water, I've caught as high as 15, 18 off one snag. Sometimes when you catch one, you'll disturb the rest, and you have to just kind of work with it a little bit. Come back to that. You know, wading offers a number of advantages. For one thing, it's completely silent, plus the angler creates a small image compared to a boat, and is much less likely to be seen or heard by fish, even at close range. The The angler also creates a low profile. He also pays much closer attention to the water and to likely fish habitat when he's wading. Wading gives you a sort of a built-in depth finder. You can actually feel the bottom begin to drop away under you as you approach a hole or a deep ledge. You also have your own built-in temp gauge when you wade wet. You'll be able to sense warmer and cooler water areas. You'll also be able to know what the bottom consistency is, and again, this can be a big tip-off to fish location. Soft, yucky bottom areas are not that attractive to fish, but a firm clay, or even better, a sand bottom with cover is an ideal location. Old, soft bottom areas are also tough to wade and can occasionally be dangerous. If the mud is more than ankle deep, it can be a real chore to move around in. Plus, it may contain deeper holes where you'll bog down below your la. Plowing your way through waist-deep, mucky, yucky mud isn't my idea of fun. Well, look at that and go, woo, jump out of water on me. Well, you're talking about a strong. Come on here, mister. Come in here. I got my long pole, I got to get it. That ain't bad. Bad at all. You know, there's several other key advantages to long poling or vertical fishing. I call it long poling, but it's the same thing, vertical fishing. But what it does, it allows one to fish an area much more thoroughly and much quicker. Plus, with this type of equipment, you've got a tremendous amount of leverage for lifting and pulling a crappie away and out of thick cover. You've got this long extended part here, and you can rest this up under your arm for leverage, you know, to lift him up and pull him out. Another plus is being able to stay away from the fish and work a large area, you know, by standing in one spot if there is a lot of cover around. In other words, if there were stick-ups here, here, and here, I could work all of this with this long pole and not move an inch. What it boils down to, you're just gonna do a whole lot better fishing areas of this type the way that we're fishing them right now. Whoa. Uh-oh. Well, you just full of yourself, ain't you? You're gonna get all hung up in the stick up. Whoa. He swallowed it. He absolutely ate the whole thing. Yes, he did. Look how thick that fish is across the back. You know, I've been talking about all the pluses and good points about wade fishing. Let's spend a minute and discuss a few disadvantages. First, you're limited to what you can carry. No tackle boxes, coolers, ice, extra rods, sandwiches, cold drinks. All the extras will have to be left in your truck, your car, your boat, or left on the bank. And if you wade very far and need something, guess what? You'll have to wade back and get it. But sometimes that's not all that bad, because you can fish your way back. However, it's smart to carry along with you a canteen of water, extra jig heads, and an assortment of colorful jig bodies. And speaking of colorful jig bodies, color is very, very important in off-colored water. And this is why a little device like this can eliminate the guesswork of which color can be most visible at a certain time of day, depth, and water clarity. Woo! Breaking water. Boy, y'all get that hook. Y'all got that hook. There we go. You know, as I stated earlier, the shallower areas with the most cover are going to be found in the upper reaches of the major creeks and the upper end of the impoundment itself. In these locations, most of the defined channels have silted in, except for the river channel. These filled-in areas were caused by wind and wave action, and about the only defined channels to be found are in the upper 1/3 of the creek coves and on out toward deeper water. However shallow ditches are present, these are formed every year by heavy rains during the low water periods. Rainwater, which causes runoff in the small pockets and depressions, have carved their way out into and across the shallow flats, forming V's and U-shaped ditches that will average in depths of, say, 1 to about 3 feet. These will not show up on a map, but they can be found by wading the flats. Believe me, they're not hard to find. As you wade, you'll step off into them, and by observing the height of the secondary growth, you'll be able to detect their locations. The brush and weeds in the flats that grew up last summer and in early fall during winter drawdown will stand taller, whereas the growth in and along the washes won't stand as high because they're in a little bit deeper water. Here we go. Come back here, crazy thing. Yo, where are you going? Trying to get through my legs. That wind blowing that line, just singing like a guitar string. You know, over the years, I've discussed these presentation tips I'm going to show you many times. And if you've heard them before, well, bear with us just a few seconds, because I find them interesting enough and helpful enough to mention them again. When vertical fishing, I find that by using either a hook snap or a loop knot on my jig, it'll definitely increase my strikes up to 30% or more, because it lets the jig swim in a more of a horizontal and natural motion than by tying direct to the hook. However, if you prefer to tie direct, be sure that the knot is positioned in the center of the hook eye. Letting the knot work forward on the hook eye allows the jig to dangle at an odd angle. And another tip that will help you catch more crappie is to open the bend or gap of the hook slightly, which will increase the hooking capacity. And one additional tip would be, when you're fishing in extremely thick cover, you sure don't want to open the gap. Instead, place a small rubber band over the barb of the hook and then carefully pull it over the eyelet of the jig. This will make it extremely weedless. Come on. Come on back here. Got it good. Legs too. You know, it's important to remember that crappie, like bass, are structurally oriented, and they will relate to break lines. Even during the spawning season, you'll find that the largest crappie in an area will target in, they'll zero in to a drop-off with cover. Now sure, they'll spawn in shallow water in lakes of this type, but they're usually going to spawn where there's a ditch, a wash, a slough, a depression, or a little small channel that meanders its way, you know, out from the shoreline on out into the lake itself. Now keep in mind that a break line will not necessarily hold many crappie. A term one needs to understand is break. A break is that area on a break line that has some form of cover. Crappie are predominantly object-oriented. Objects, shallow or deep, are very attractive to crappie, and it'll hold them in these locations most of the time and most of the year, only if the depth is to their liking. Look at the size of this fish here. Mr. Hotshot. Ouch. Get that hook in my finger and I'll have to slap your little face. You don't like that old thing stuck up. Wait a minute, fix my jig and let me admire you, and then I'll turn you loose. He went right back to that stump. Regardless of the lake, river, or pond you fish, if it fluctuates, it's going to have a major effect on fish location. And flood control lakes are a prime example. Crappie learn quick that any area they select to use is only temporary because of the constant changing water levels. The fish you locate today, they could be gone tomorrow. However, if the lake is stable, they could use the same area for a much longer time. But once the water starts to rise or fall with a noticeable change, they're on the move again. And when they move, either shallow or deeper, they'll usually travel along a break line. And one of the best is a drop-off along a channel bank. You know, when you're faced with changing water levels, here are a few things to keep in mind. The responses of crappie to rising water are virtually the same on all reservoirs, rivers, and small lakes. You can expect them to move into newly inundated shallows. As with any movement toward the shallows, the fish will usually follow a defined route or path related to some manner of structure. That structure could very well be what we've been discussing. The drainage areas, such as gullies or ditches. These are very important as the crappie approaches the extreme warmer shallows. The fish normally will remain in a little bit deeper water along the route for spawning, but when they're feeding, they'll move in very, very shallow. By zeroing in on these types of potential movement routes and looking for the shallow cover areas near them, you can really shorten your search time. When the crappie are found in recently flooded shallows with lots of cover, they'll accept several different lures, but two of the easiest to fish would be the mini king jig like we're fishing today, and by casting this jig with ultralight gear with an elbow spinner attached to the jig. The spinner combination will allow for fewer hang-ups. Since shallow water feeding crappie are very active, the angler should fish fairly fast until he locates a fish and discovers a better lure or presentation. Now on falling water, this causes an instinctive survival in crappie. Their immediate response is to move toward deeper water. A very gradual fall in the water level appears to cause no immediate alarm, and the crappie may continue to feed and keep house during the spawn. But if a rapid fall should occur and send them hurrying toward deeper water, those which have laid their eggs have lost the spawn for this year. If they've not spawned, they must wait until the water stabilizes and begin housekeeping all over again in a new location. All around. Come here, come here, come here. Come to me. Let me show you what I'm doing. I'm not fishing really that much line. When I catch one of these things, I'm gonna put you right back. Now go right back down in your stump. I walked up too close on that. There might have been more than one there. But what I'm doing with this thing, I'm not fishing but really that much line off the end of it, 2 or 3 feet, because you can tell the depth of water I'm in. At times I'm up to about the bottom of my pockets, and other times it's knee deep. But when I hit a fish, the first thing I do with this little underspin, I mash that button, but I keep a little tension on it. That way he's running from me, but I'm letting out line. That way I've got enough line out that I can pull the fish to me and reach down. If I tried to pull him in with, about 2.5 feet, 3 feet of line on this pole, I'm gonna be well roping him like this all the way in. So a tip, if you're using this type of equipment, when you hang a fish, you set the hook. You don't have to set it that hard. You don't want to set a hook real hard on a crappie, but I'm keeping tension on him. I take my baby finger and mash it right there and let out just a little bit of line, letting him fight. Then I've got enough line out to where I can bring this 12-foot pole back into me with a bend in it and catch that fish right there, if that's worth anything. You know, the key to fishing this type of cover is to approach it fairly quiet and drop your jig down beside the cover and vertical fish it at several different depths. Now we're in shallower water, it's not as critical, but if we were out in deeper water, we would have to control our depth until we establish the depth level that the fish we're using. By dropping the jig all the way to the bottom, fishing right off of the bottom and then raising it up slowly until we came up almost back to the surface, trying to establish the depth level. So that's very, very important in the way that you work the jig. You don't want to work it very fast in off-colored water. Where are you going to go there, Buster boy? I'll tell you where you're going to go. Your face is going to go right on my thumb. Whoa. That crazy thing go. Boy, you are full of yourself. You act like a tarpon. Look at that thing. Hey, you deserve to be turned loose for that much fun. Big old thick thing. Pretty fish. I'm gonna put you right back there. Get out of there. Good gosh. You know, there's so much to tell you about this kind of fishing. It's just impossible to do in this short time span. But maybe, just maybe, I've given you a start. As I said earlier, wading, well, it may not be for everyone, but for the open-minded angler looking for a way to catch springtime crappie he can't get to by boat, well, this is a way to go. We'll see you next time.